USAF Flight 1493 was a scheduled passenger service from Syracuse, New York, making stops at Washington, D.C., Columbus, Ohio, and Los Angeles, before continuing to San Francisco. On February 1, 1991, Flight 1493 was operated using a Boeing 737-300 after a crew change in Washington. It was under the command of Captain Colin Shaw, 48 years old, a highly experienced pilot with approximately 16,300 total flight hours, and First Officer David Kelly, 32 years old, who had approximately 4,300 total flight hours with 982 hours on the Boeing 737. Flying into Lax, the aircraft had a total of 89 people on board, 83 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and the 2 pilots. On February 1, 1991, SkyWest Airlines Flight 5569 was operated using a twin-engine Fairchild Metroliner. The flight was scheduled to depart at Lax on the final leg of a multi-city schedule and was bound for Palmdale, California, with 10 passengers and 2 pilots aboard. The aircraft didn't carry a cockpit voice recorder nor a flight data recorder, as it was not required to do so at that time. Both of Flight 5569's pilot had significant experience. Captain Andrew Lucas, 32 years old, had approximately 8,800 hours of flight time, and First Officer Frank Prentice, 45 years old, had approximately 8,000 hours of flight time, including 1,363 hours on the Metroliner. The airport Lax consists of 4 parallel runways, with the 2 runways and associated taxiways north of the terminal called the North Complex. Aircraft that landed on the outer runway 24R would cross the inner runway 24L in order to reach the terminal. Aircraft control. The air traffic controller in charge of takeoffs and landings in the Lax Tower was Robin Lee Washer. She had been working as an air traffic controller since 1982 and began working at Lax in 1989. The clearance delivery controller in charge of taxiing aircraft was Francita Vandiver, who had previously served as an air traffic controller in the US Navy. She had been working at Lax since 1988. SkyWest 5569 was cleared by air traffic controller Washer in the Lax Tower to taxi to runway 24L, moving from gate 32 to the runway via taxiway Kilo 48 Tango and 45. The plane was briefly not visible from the tower on taxiway 48 between Kilo and Tango in the area known as No Man's Land. Immediately prior to SkyWest 5569 reaching runway 24L, a Wings West aircraft had landed on 24R and was awaiting permission to cross 24L and taxi to the terminal. The local controller attempted to contact the Wings West aircraft, but the crew had changed frequencies and didn't answer, distracting Washer as she attempted to re-establish communications. Shortly after 6 p.m. local time, USAF Flight 1493 was on final approach to Lax. The Metroliner was cleared by the local controller to taxi into its takeoff position on 24L at the intersection of taxiway 45, some 2,200 feet up from the runway threshold. After 4 attempts by the local controller, the Wings West aircraft finally responded to the tower and apologized for switching frequencies. Washer then cleared the USA flight to land on 24L, even though the SkyWest Metroliner was still holding in takeoff position on the runway. With this activity ongoing, another Wings West aircraft, a Metroliner similar to SkyWest 5569, called the tower reporting they were ready for takeoff. Washer queried this aircraft about their position, and they told her they were holding on a taxiway short of 24L. The flight progress strip for this flight had not yet been given to Washer by controller Vandiver, and the Washer mistakenly thought this Metroliner was SkyWest 5569, and thus the runway was clear of aircraft. The first officer of the USAF flight recalled hearing this conversation but didn't remember anyone being clear to hold on the runway. The USAF flight touched down near the runway threshold. just as the nose was being lowered. The first officer noticed SkyWest 5569 on the runway and applied maximum braking, but it was too late. The US airplane slammed into the Metroliner, crashing it beneath its fuselage. The 737 proceeded to skid down the runway, then veered off the left side and came to rest on the far side of the taxiway against a closed fire station building, where it eventually caught fire. Large debris from the Metroliner, including its tail, wings and right engine, were found on the runway and between the runway and the abandoned fire station. The accident was witnessed from a plane carrying the Vancouver Canucks, who were arriving for an NHL hockey game against the Los Angeles Kings. The captain of the charter aircraft, having just landed, powered up the engines to get away from the fireball of the accident. The team was unsure if the US Air 737 was going to stop before it collided with the airplane. The Canucks were shaken by the experience and lost to the Kings by a score of 9-1, their worst loss of the 1990-91 season. The 35 dead included all 12 people on SkyWest 5569 and 23 of the 89 on board of the US Air 1493. 2 of the US Air fatalities were passengers who initially survived the crash, but died from burn injuries 3 and 31 days after the crash. First Officer David Kelly, who was flying the US Air 1493 during the accident leg, reported that she didn't see SkyWest 5569 until he lowered the nose of the aircraft onto the runway after landing. Kelly also said that he applied the brakes but didn't have enough time for evasive action. Statements made by passengers who survived the crash were consistent with his testimony. Local controller Vasha, who cleared both aircraft to use the same runway, testified before the NTSB and accepted blame for causing the crash. She said she originally thought the landing US airplane had been hit by a bomb, then realized something went wrong. She testified that rooftop lights in her line of sight caused glare in the tower, making it difficult to see small planes at the intersection where the SkyWest plane was positioned. Just before the accident, she confused the SkyWest plane with another commuter airliner that was on a taxiway near the end of the runway, making matters more difficult. The ground radar at LAX was not working on the day of the accident.